house stood at the edge of a quiet street, its paint chipped, its shutters sagging, and its roofline tilting ever so slightly, as though it carried the weight of forgotten years. For most of the neighbors, it was just another relic of the town's aging architecture, a structure ignored and passed by without thought. But for 12-year-old Ethan Miller, that house was not just home. It was a place filled with whispers, shadows, and a sound that no one could ever explain. Ethan was not the kind of boy who sought attention. He was quiet, observant, the type who noticed cracks in the sidewalk, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the way his mother's voice softened when she was tired. But the one thing he noticed more than anyone else was sound. Every creak, every groan, every distant hum seemed to catch his ear with sharper clarity than it did for others. So when the footsteps began, he heard them first. It was late one evening, the sky bruised purple with the promise of nightfall, when Ethan lay awake in his room. His bed pressed against the wall, his eyes tracing patterns in the ceiling. That was when it came. A slow, deliberate creak above him, as though someone was pacing just overhead. At first he thought it was his imagination, the settling of old wood, perhaps even the wind. But then it came again. Step, step, step. A pause, then another step. Ethan's breath caught. His house had no upstairs. At least, not in the way most houses did. There was an attic above, but it was sealed, unreachable without dragging out a ladder and pulling open the stubborn hatch in the hallway ceiling. No one ever went up there. His mother had told him it was filled only with dust, cobwebs, and boxes, left behind by the previous owners, yet the footsteps were unmistakable. The boy sat up in bed, his heart thudding against his ribs. He strained to listen, his ears sharpened by fear. The steps moved slowly, rhythmically, as though someone, or something, was walking back and forth across the attic floor. He wanted to scream for his mother, but his voice stuck in his throat. What if she didn't hear it? What if she didn't believe him? The sound continued for nearly a minute before it stopped. The silence that followed was even heavier than the noise, pressing against Ethan's chest until he finally lay back down, staring into the dark. Sleep never came. The next morning, Ethan tried to dismiss it. He told himself it had been the house settling, the echo of cars passing outside, or perhaps a dream. But deep down, he knew better. And when night fell again, the footsteps returned. Step. Step, step. This time, he leapt from bed and hurried into the hallway. His mother, Claire Miller, was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her cup of tea. Ethan burst in, his words tumbling over themselves. "Mom, someone's in the attic!" Claire looked at him startled, before softening with a tired smile. "Ethan, honey, no one's in the attic. It's just the house making noises. Old wood. Does that sometimes?" "No, Mom, I heard it. Footsteps. Walking." She sighed, pushing her tea aside. "I'll prove it to you." Dragging the ladder from the closet, she positioned it beneath the attic hatch. With a grunt, she tugged the rope, pulling the creaky door down. Dust rained lightly as she climbed up into the dark space above. Ethan held his breath as she flicked on the flashlight and swept the beam across the attic. Boxes, cobwebs, an old trunk. Nothing else. "See?" she called down. "Just storage." Ethan's heart sank, but he said nothing. She closed the hatch, folded the ladder, and gave him a reassuring hug. "You're just letting your imagination run wild. No monsters. Upstairs, okay?" He nodded, though his chest still felt heavy. Because when she had been searching, Ethan had been listening, and in that brief silence, he could swear he still heard a faint creak in the corner of the attic, far from where her flashlight had reached. From that night on, the footsteps became part of Ethan's world. Sometimes they came when the wind howled, other times in the dead stillness of night. They were not constant, but frequent enough that he could not dismiss them. Step, 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 always pacing, always waiting. Weeks passed and the boy grew pale and restless, his schoolwork slipping, his friends noticing his distracted gaze. He could no longer sleep peacefully, always listening for the sound above. His mother began to worry. Convinced, Her son was succumbing to overactive imagination or stress. But then, one night, something changed. Ethan awoke not to footsteps, but to a whisper. It was faint, almost like the sigh of the wind, but it carried syllables, words half-formed. He froze, straining his ears. The voice was soft, hushed, and impossibly close, yet still coming from the attic. Help. The boy's stomach dropped. He clutched his blanket to his chest, heart pounding. He wanted to scream, but the sound of the whisper seemed to steal his breath. He lay there for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for more. But the whisper never came again. Only the silence, heavy and suffocating. The next day, Ethan could no longer keep the secret to himself. At school, he told his best friend Lucas, "There's someone in the attic," Ethan whispered during lunch. Lucas laughed. "Nobody lives upstairs, you're just scared of creaky noises." "No," Ethan insisted, his voice trembling. "I heard footsteps, and last night, I heard a voice." Lucas rolled his eyes, but later that week, he came over for a sleepover. Ethan begged him to stay up, to listen. They waited in the dark, whispering nervously, until finally, step, step, step. Lucas froze. His eyes widened. He heard it too. The two boys clung to their blankets, staring at the ceiling as the steps moved back and forth. Lucas whispered, "There's really someone up there." The sound stopped abruptly, as though whoever, or whatever it was, had realized it was being listened to. The silence that followed was so intense it made both boys afraid to move. When morning came, Lucas refused to speak of it. He left early, avoiding Ethan's gaze, and later denied to anyone else that he had heard a thing. But Ethan knew the truth. The footsteps were real, and the voice in the attic was waiting. In this world, every story has a beginning. Some stories make us laugh, others inspire us. But then, there are those rare ones that crawl under our skin. Stories that keep us awake at night, whispering in the silence, reminding us that not everything around us can be explained. This is one of those stories. You are watching Epic Story Hub, and today we unravel the chilling mystery of the boy who heard footsteps in the attic, but nobody lived upstairs. It begins with a boy named Daniel. He was just 11 years old, a quiet child with curious eyes and a love for books. He lived with his mother and younger sister in a modest two-story house at the edge of a small town. To outsiders, the house looked ordinary. Cream-painted walls, a wooden porch, a garden that never quite bloomed the way it should. But inside, there was a silence, a heavy silence that seemed to swallow every sound, every laugh, every word spoken inside its walls. Daniel's family had moved into the house just 2 months earlier. His mother had chosen it because it was affordable, spacious enough for her 2 children, and close to her work. She was a single parent, carrying the weight of responsibility alone, and to her, the house was a blessing. But to Daniel, something about it felt wrong. He couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the way the floorboards creaked even when no one was walking. Maybe it was the strange cold drafts that would brush against his skin at night, though every window was shut. Or maybe it was the attic. The attic door was in the hallway upstairs, just outside Daniel's room. It was an old wooden hatch with a thin metal latch. His mother had told him never to worry about it, that it was just for storage, and that it was empty. But Daniel had noticed something that unsettled him deeply. The latch was often unlocked, even though nobody had touched it. Then, one night, it began. Daniel was lying in his bed, his little sister asleep across the hallway. The house was still. His mother had gone to bed hours ago. And then he heard it. Soft, deliberate footsteps above his head. The slow, creaking sound of weight shifting on old wood. Step, step, step. His heart froze. He knew exactly where the sound was coming from. The attic. He sat up, straining his ears, holding his breath. The steps were not random. They had rhythm, like someone pacing, back and forth, back and forth. Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to scream for his mother, but something inside him told him not to. The footsteps went on for nearly 5 minutes before finally stopping. Then, silence. The next morning, Daniel told his mother. She laughed nervously, brushing it off as his imagination. Old houses made noises, she said. Wood expanded, pipes shifted, the wind whistled. But Daniel knew the difference. He hadn't imagined it. He was certain. Someone had been walking in the attic. Over the next week, it happened. Again, always at night. Always when the house had fallen into deep silence. Sometimes the steps were quick, urgent, like someone running across the floorboards. Other times, slow and dragging, as if whoever, or whatever, was up there wanted to be heard. Daniel grew more and more terrified. He stopped sleeping properly, his eyes dark with exhaustion. His mother noticed, but she was too tired herself, too burdened with work and bills to take him seriously. One night, when the sound returned, Daniel couldn't hold it in anymore. He grabbed a flashlight and crept into the hallway, staring at the attic door. His hand trembled as he reached for the latch. His instincts screamed at him not to open it. But before he could decide, the footsteps stopped. The silence was louder than the noise had been. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his heart racing, before retreating back to his room. What Daniel didn't know then was that the footsteps were just the beginning. Soon, the entire family would be pulled into a mystery darker than they could ever imagine. A mystery that would reveal secrets about the house, its past, and the chilling truth of who, or what, was sharing the space above their heads.